Welcome to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. Today's guest is Dorothea Gordon. She is a life coach, alternative practitioner, and author of When Life Has Other Plans. Today, we'll be talking about how paranormal experiences introduced her to physical and mental healing methods that she uses in her practice today. Dorothea, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Johnny, for having me.
Now, you were working as a high school teacher, and at that time, you also trained to be an energy healer. What prompted you to learn about that modality?
I wanted to find a way of healing where people wouldn't have to take medication because my father was poisoned basically by too many medicines that they gave him. So I was looking for ways of approaching healing in a more natural, non-invasive, regenerative way.
At some point, you also got involved in past life regression. How did that happen?
Oh, that's a fascinating story
I bet.
and was very unusual. As a high school teacher, I also took training in handwriting analysis because I found that as a helpful tool to assess my students at the beginning of the school year, what were their strengths, their weaknesses, how could I best support them. And after that, I put an ad in the paper saying I was available for personality assessments for businesses and so on. A young fellow from the University of Victoria, from the west coast of Canada, said that he was doing a program called Is There Life Before Life, and would I want to participate? And I said, well, what's involved? Because I had grown up as a Catholic and there was no life before life. It was only, after life, have a good life and you'll be rewarded. So he said he would get me in touch with a lady who regressed people, and all I had to do was get a handwriting sample of the people as they were now, and then get a handwriting sample while they were in a regression. The way it worked was that those people had their eyes closed, they were blind as bats, some without glasses. And then we asked them, can you please write something whilst you're in a life as a poet or as a sea captain or as a shepherd or something like that. And the interesting thing was that the character described as having in that life showed up in the writing all of a sudden. The strokes went in a different direction, the size changed and so on. And I could not explain how they would know how to do that because it was something very subconscious. And handwriting reflects what's going on in your brain. So they were on a different wavelength at that time. We did about 50 people, and after that, I was just absolutely floored. How can this be? It was such a paradigm shift for me that I never looked back and said, there is something very true about this. I've seen it in the writing. They couldn't know how to change their writings to fit the character traits.
So you were invited to participate in this documentary, Is There Life Before Life?
Correct.
Because you were a handwriting analyst. That's not something that we would really expect because it's just so out of the box. So during these sessions, the participants were asked to write something during one life, something during another, which was completely different from how they normally write.
Correct.
I know my handwriting's terrible. If I was regressed, I doubt I would have the beautiful cursive style of a poet, but it's a very interesting idea. So did that inspire you to do further research into past life regression and past lives as well?
It did. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I had 2 babies after that. So I didn't get around to doing that research anymore because my time was taken up by them. But I always had the intention of pursuing that. And now maybe I will still get around to it. The fellow who phoned, he was a psychology student and he was very creative. He called in healers and psychics and mediums and really dealt with the subject from all angles. And I just was the one with handwriting. So that was all important in my life that I had that experience to change old paradigms and get on a new track.
You've been regressed yourself. Was that shortly after this experience or was it much later?
Yeah, that was 6 months later because I had insisted I not be regressed before, so my work would not be influenced subjectively. I wanted to be free of all that, and then I was going to go into a regression. So I went into 2 lives, and it was interesting that these stories felt like they had just been sitting under my surface and were very, very important that they could come out. And what happens is when you get regressed, if it's done properly, they don't hypnotize you, they mesmerize you. You go into a different brainwave, it's called a delta wave, where you're almost not aware of your body. Like I saw it like a film. And the first regression I went into, I was in 16th century Bavaria, Germany, where I'm from. And I was in the town or the city where I went to university. It was fascinating to see that city in the 16th century compared to the 20th century while I was there. The cobblestones, the little houses, the way people were dressed. I was a stonemason working on the cathedral that they were building at that time. I married the love of my life. She died in childbirth and I never got over it. I climbed up that tower that I was building and jumped off. So I basically killed myself.
Do you actually remember jumping off the tower?
I remember that, but I don't remember hitting the ground. It felt like my soul was already leaving the body before I hit. Yeah.
You made a really interesting point. I've never heard this before, where when regression is done properly, you're not hypnotized, you're mesmerized. What is the difference there?
With hypnosis, you are told what to do and what to see. Mesmerizing is a more meditative approach, lots of breathing, lots of visualization, where you go down the stairs to access your unconscious mind, where all these Akashic records are kept. The second life I went into was the more important one, especially important for this life now, because I found myself as a little girl in Italy. My parents had died in a boating accident. I was with my grandparents who didn't want me because they were rich people, didn't want to have a child around. So they sent me to England to be educated there. And I ended up becoming a governess and was with nobility. I find it interesting nowadays that I love to watch period programs because they seem so familiar to me. I can see myself. I saw myself wearing a dark cap and a dark cloth and so on. I saw my charges, but I didn't like being in that position. I was already a feisty spirit in that life. And I decided to marry, and I married a stone, again, mason. He made masonry, bricks and so on, but he was a scoundrel and eventually got murdered. And that's the thing where I like to watch murder mysteries that happen in England in a period situation. And I had a mentally handicapped child and I died of 44. That life has so many parallels to my life now that I'm almost reliving it, except this time I went from Germany to Canada, again an English-speaking country, a different society, a marriage that didn't end in death but in divorce, a physically handicapped child, and many, many parallels are happening. So for me to have had this experience that was 40 years ago, I didn't know that my life was going to develop into that kind of track. I was really blown away.
What was it like to remember life that you were a man and not a woman?
It had no difference. I am who I am. I am the soul. I am the spirit. And what kind of body I inhabit doesn't matter to me.
Looking back to these past lives, did that give you any kind of insight into the afterlife and that realm?
Oh, it was absolutely fascinating because the people we were interviewing had been very skeptical and critical, but while they were in the regression, they were completely relaxed and told us that they went through several insights, that they knew the people then that they know now, that when they left their body, they usually hung around for 3 days to console the people that had lost them. And the other important thing was that they said it's paramount that the grieving relatives let the soul go and not say, oh, why did you leave me? Thank you for being in my life. And then we'll see you in the next life. And so many of them said that, let me go.
Really?
Rather than hang on, hold hands, be thankful for having had them and let them go.
From these experiences, I would imagine that reincarnation is pretty much a no-brainer for you based on that.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Is there also a decreased fear of death because of these experiences? Because you know that we don't really die. We're not gone forever. We have to come back.
Yes, we are energy, and energy cannot be destroyed. It shows up in different ways. I have seen situations where, especially later with my metaphysical experiences, where people remembered lives in other places when they were given pictures Or when they were in Scotland, for instance, and stood in front of one of those castles, that they said, I know exactly where this path goes and that path goes. Yeah, it was a lot of information that we got out of those regressions.
There's been a lot of study in that area. From the regression experiences, do you find that your intuitive gifts or capabilities are somewhat heightened?
Oh, absolutely. What happened after those regressions put me on a new path where I decided to go more deeply into energy healing, because the lady I was doing the regressions with was also an energy healer. There are no coincidences in life. You get put into the company of whoever is most beneficial to you.
Good point. That goes back to what you mentioned earlier. When you were regressed, you noticed people that you know now. Did you recognize people in your past lives that are actually in your current life?
My mother.
That's incredible. I'm jealous.
Also my ex-husband.
So who were they in your past lives?
My husband was a trapper in northern Canada, and I was an Indigenous woman. We lived together and had children together. With my mother, she was the husband I had in that life in England.
You kind of switched places then, in that case.
Yeah.
These discussions of past lives and, reincarnation eventually bring up the question about the life between life stage where, let's say, your husband in one life agrees to become your mother in another life. Do you remember any of that, or is that something that was not yet explored?
No, I don't. I haven't explored that personally. But I know of people who were in regression who were saying, oh, I find myself in a very bright and beautiful place, and there are lots of other souls around me, and we're all sitting down and we're planning my new incarnation. And I say to someone, okay, are you going to be my father who's mean and nasty? So I can learn from that. Are you going to be my mother who is supportive but a wimp? Are you going to be my sister who's mean and betrays me? Are you going to be my husband? It's when I watch movies, I always look at them like that, like somebody has given out the roles, you play this, you play that. But in reality, they are somebody completely different. And who you are is who your spirit is.
It sounds like casting a play or casting a movie.
Absolutely, yeah. You script your own life. It was told that you come into your life with a blueprint. Like a house where the size is given, the rooms are given, the stories are given, and they're not movable. But you can put in the colors, the carpets, the furniture, and so on. You have a say in that.
So the events are not movable.
Exactly, yeah. You have planned them, and we often pray for people that they may be saved from this or that, but that's something that, in my humble opinion, have scripted into their life because it's an event with which they can grow. And that's the purpose of us souls being here, to grow.
Which I've heard many times. We should talk about your metaphysical experiences. How do you discern between paranormal and metaphysical, or are they basically lumped into one realm?
They're in one realm. That means that energies or spirits come to us either to save us from something or to guide us onto another plane. I've had quite a number of those things. I look at them as normal now in my life, but when they first started happening, it came as a major surprise, such as when my mother died in 1985. I was already in Canada, my sisters were still over there, and they phoned me and said, after Mom died, all the electrical equipment is sparking now, and there's sparks coming out of the plugs. What can we do? And I was told by my energy teacher for us girls to get on the phone and assure my mother's spirit that we were going to be okay. Once we did that, everything was fine. It was completely normal as before. There was another interesting thing that one of the girls phoned me and said that she had taken her watch off on the 11th and looked at it a few days later, and it was on the 13th. And when she put it on, she then looked at it again, and it had jumped between the 16th and the 17th. And I had asked my mother to give me a sign that when she passes over to the other side, that I know that she's okay. But what happened was that she had moved an inanimate object in such a way that the date was a prediction that on the 13th, she already had moved it to the 17th. I had another experience where I was having a panic attack in a lake and thought that I was going to drown and was kicking, and up comes this boat. And the guy says, oh, do you want me to pull you out? And I said, yeah, please. And so he pulled me out, and I stepped out onto the ground. And when I turned around to thank him, he was gone. boat, the man, everything was gone.
So the boat was gone too?
The boat was gone. Yeah. Those are things that are unusual. And the most amazing recent one was when I had met my husband, who was then a boyfriend, and he was dithering around as far as commitment was concerned. And I told him I was going to write him a letter, a goodbye letter. I got a message. There was an event happening that evening, how to speak to the spirits. And I get what I call kick in the bum, which means I have to go and follow that direction. To make a long story short, my father, with whom I never had a good relationship, all of a sudden showed up. I could see him in my mind's eye. When we were doing the work, we had a glass that said yes, no. I asked him, are you here because of this situation I'm in where I don't know what to do? And the glass said, yes. Is this relationship that I'm about to break up with, is this going to work? Yes. Should I carry on? Yes. And then the medium comes up and says, oh, do you have a brother? And I said, no. And then I saw him, and it was my father's brother, also deceased. And I said to him, are you going to help my partner? And he said, yes. And is it going to work out for him as well? So anyway, I got the spirit world involved because it was so important that I would get married to that guy, because he is one of the people who I can talk to, live with, and he understands. It's just the ideal partner that I wish on everyone. And I was going to throw him away unless the spirit world moved in.
They came into the fray at the right moment. Just to clarify, these experiences, was it more of a clairaudient reception or clairvoyant, or was the communication mostly through the medium?
No, I was in there. I saw my father. The medium had just put us into a meditative state, and then we got to go to tables and sit with other people and ask our questions and work with those glasses that were inspired to move.
You actually saw them?
Absolutely, yeah. My father, when he first showed up, was behind me. I said to him, what do you want here? And then I saw my uncle. It's like watching it on a screen. You're not aware of the other people in the room, but all you see is the people who want to talk to you. And they disappeared because the other participants in the group also wanted to have a say. But it was very, very clear. I have these experiences not on a regular basis, but eventually they come up when I'm in a difficult situation that I can see a spirit or I can feel it. But that was the most extreme, where two spirits showed up and tried to influence me.
So your communication with the spirit world is obviously heightened. When you have these type of experiences, the veil between this world and the other realm, the afterlife.
In between, yeah, in my case, yeah. It's called stepping through the veil.
Do you think because of what's going on, where you hear people talking about the medium explosion, the empathic Big Bang, ascension, and so on, do you think that the veil for all of us is getting a little bit thinner?
Absolutely. For those people who are willing and ready to expand their consciousness, it's definitely getting thinner. Many people have a real hunger for this kind of information and listen to their hearts. And their hearts and souls always say, go and do what helps you and the planet. And because our planet is in such peril, we need to have more empaths that impact others as well. Because since we're all energy, the energy that we are and that we vibrate then goes into our environment. The more beneficial our environment can be, the more beneficial the waves go out into the universe and into the planet. I call it the ripple effect.
Let's talk about your practice. It seems to be that you combine past life regression with energy field balancing.
Yes, the energy field is a multi-layered envelope around the body, and it's called the aura. Within that aura is the chakra system. Those are 7 spinning vortices that suck in energy from our environment. And there are also the meridians, which are the energy pathways where the energy travels. So when those are flowing freely, the person has enough strength to deal with life's challenges. Now, often stress and worry and anxiety and so on weaken that energy body, like cause punctures or openings and create an imbalance which can lead to dis-ease. So many people who are in a dis-eased state have tears or holes sometimes in their energy field. An energy work is a conduit to bring in new energy or to take old blockages out and to reestablish new flow.
Since you bring up energy fields, one of the first things I think of is a shaman, which is a practice that has been around for probably thousands of years. Is what you do related to shamanism or connected to it, or is it something a little bit different?
We are all working in the energy field, and it's just a different method, how the shaman approaches it or how I approach it. But basically, we are conduits. We work with our hands or our chakras, and there's an opening around the third chakra, which channels massive energies if you have to. But I just use my hands. They use drums, they use vibrations, they use chanting, all different forms of energy to bring in what the fraction or the person whose soul has fractured, what they need to bring them back together. I myself took part in shamanistic healing, and it was amazing. It was just very healing, and I felt very put together afterwards.
How is the practice of the shaman somewhat similar to the past life regressionist in terms of healing?
They also have access, as do energy healers if they are so trained, to look into past lives and see what kind of problems our bodies nowadays bring in from the past. The people who have a constant backache, and the shaman says, oh, I can see that it was a Roman sword that punctured you. Other people have neck and shoulder aches. Well, chances are that they got hanged somewhere. Also, their contacts with other spirits that help them see things or hear things or feel things. I'm basically a shaman too.
I wasn't too far off the mark there.
No.
So how do you combine this practice with the past life regression with your clients?
In a way, I have, because the clients would come and complain about certain ailments that they had and couldn't get rid of. I often have what I called angelic beings in my room. I would confer with them, and they would say, that's happening, but it's coming from another life. Explain it to the person. And it was often that I had to be careful. People weren't always open. But yeah, there is a lot of similarity between past life work. When you do a regression, not only do you get into the past life, but you also find out a lot more about yourself than you had ever known. You can all of a sudden explain why you're doing certain things, why you are with certain people, why this is happening to you, because you didn't learn your lesson in the last life or the previous life. It's like going to school and you have to write the test again and again and again until you pass it. And then all of a sudden, the situation disappears. The more you are alert of what's going on in your life and where you spend your energy, negative or positive, the more you can get an idea of why you have certain ailments. What happened was I would work on them, ailments went away. Then they went back in their old environment, which was not very conducive to well-being. 3 months later, they were back and said, well, it's all back. So it's very important that they can recognize that they need to go on to a different paradigm.
What else can you tell us about what you've learned about your journey, learning about past life regression, learning about energy healing?
It's been the most important aspect that ever happened to me. I thought I would plan my life, it would go a regular way. Next thing I know, I'm in Canada and I have to adjust to a new society. But at the same time, I was put into this wonderful, eye-opening path that led me first to past life regressions, then to energy healing and to dream building. I'm a certified dream builder coach where people and help people approach their dreams and visions in a more constructive way and supportive way. We work with the quantum field. We don't just say, I'll do this and that when that has happened, but we say the quantum field is on our side. It wants us to succeed if that's what is for our own benefit. And then we go and take the necessary steps. So it's a fascinating.
Dream builder. I've never heard that term before. Where did that come from?
Dream building, the way I was trained, works with a vision. It's not therapy where you go into your past and figure out this, that, and the other. You have a dream and you look forward. And that's the beauty of it. You don't have to justify why you can't do it. You just know that this is something that is important in your life. I was exposed to that again, not by coincidence. I heard a program that was offered by Mary Morrissey. I think it's called Life Institute. But I trained with them and was exposed to the approach of coming from your dream rather than going towards it. When you already know that this dream is what you want and you act as if it has already happened, then it's far more empowering because you're sending that message out to the universe and the universe will give you back what you send out. So if you say, oh, I can't do this because I'm too old or too fat, I can't change careers, then the universe will give you more of that. But if you say, I know that the universe is on my side and I will take the necessary steps, amazing things happen.
So how do we know then when we are actually receiving messages from the universe and it's not just our imagination?
Some people hear a little voice that says something and nags them. Other people see pictures. Others come in contact with information that is exactly the answer to what they had been asking for. In my case, I just get what I call the kick in the butt, where my intuition, that part of me that knows far more than I do in my head, gives me the signal, okay, act on this. So by listening to the heart and what it says, because the heart has its own brain. It has a different agenda than what the mind has. The mind often talks us out of things, but the heart does not. And the heart is connected to the body. And when I have a situation where I need to get some advice, I say to my body, is this beneficial? And then when my stomach remains quiet, calm, I know it is. If it goes, then I know, no, this is not a good idea. Stay away from it.
Okay.
So listening to your body, the body is far wiser than the mind. The mind is just a chatterbox.
I think that's very good advice. So for someone who wants to raise their spirituality and, they're not really interested in going to church, what would you recommend? Where do they start? And what are some best practices for that?
Well, there are lots of sages out there, and I believe that knowledge is power. So by acquiring some knowledge about spirituality in the non-traditional sense, non-dogmatic sense, I always suggest that people find out about Eckhart Tolle, Tolle. He is my favorite sage, and he goes all over the world and speaks. There is Dr. Joe Dispenza. He works very much with the universe and its powers, and with the power of meditation. There is Greg Braden. There is Bruce Lipton. I would suggest that people read first before they buy courses, because courses can be overwhelming online. But books you can read, you can underline, you can ask questions and so on. So lots and lots of knowledge helps to make a decision in which direction you want to go. Louise Hay is one of the women I admire. Then there's Abraham Hicks. These folks all have a beautiful message, and it depends on what kind of learning style speaks to you the most. In my book, I'm trying to make it easy for people to understand, and I present my experiences, and at the end I write what kind of a gift I got out of this hardship. It helps people to see or to take their hardships with a bit more courage rather than fall into the depth of despair.
So the book, When Life Has Other Plans, in a nutshell, what can your readers expect to get from that?
They can, if they're open to a spiritual approach to life, they can see how the universe guides us, and how when we are aware and awake, we can learn from the challenges that life presents to us. And I had many challenges from, as I'd mentioned before, a handicapped child, a stroke, cancer, accidents, and so on, that required a lot of courage. But at the same time, I always knew that there would be a lot of help, that there were angels around me. I call them winged angels and unwinged, wingless angels, because they just carried me. And when you believe that that exists, it is something you can live with, that you're not alone, that there is always help. You just need to reach out.
Winged angels and unwinged angels, how is that related to what many people refer to as spirit guides?
The unwinged angels are the people who are in this life, whom you meet and they say, oh, I've just heard about this and that, and it is exactly the answer. Or they come and say, do you need any help with this, your computer or with marketing? And they are all around us if we are on a certain wavelength. If we are in the woe is me wavelength, they don't reach us. But if we are encouraged and positive and say there is help out there, it will come, it often does come. And then, of course, the winged angels are the ones in spirit. Those are the spirit guides. I see mine all the time.
With wings?
No, not with wings, just in white robes. No, they just wander in and out in white robes. And the ones that are in my healing room, they are just light. They're just gold. There's gold around. I've had one situation where in Canada here we have many spirits who represent themselves through the indigenous population. I was working with a man and I said, "Can you smell? It smells like cigarettes," and nobody was smoking. And he said, "Yes." So we asked our teacher and she said, "Oh yeah, that's Grey Wolf. He's put up his teepee and he's helping us." So to her, that was common. To us, it was all new that you could actually smell them. But that can happen too. But usually I see them as lights or sometimes in white robes.
Angels around us. That's definitely encouraging.
Oh, it's beautiful. They are waiting to be addressed. Help, we say, and they'll come. They won't interfere unless we ask them.
Well, good. I think for everyone listening, don't be afraid to ask because they're there. Excellent. Dorothea, thanks so much for joining us today. How can our listeners find out more about you online?
They can go to my website, which is D for Dorothea and then TLC for Tender Loving Care, dtlc.ca.
Excellent. I will put that in the notes and the transcript as well. You've been listening to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing. You can also leave us a review on iTunes as well. For more info, please go to www.closertovenus.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.